Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Today's guest is Martin Box, a current co-chair of the Commercial Producers Council and a former executive producer at Airbag. Martin's career path, like most producers, is anything but ordinary. Starting with a fine art degree, he initially found himself working at a bookstore until a friend offered him a chance to be the runner on a television show. Now, that small opportunity sparked a journey through TV production, live TV floor management, and the bustling music video scene, eventually leading him to the world of advertising. Throughout his career, Martin has exemplified a Zen-like attitude, ingenuity, and an unwavering commitment to making anything happen. Known for his eloquence, good nature, and collaborative spirit, he has successfully navigated high-pressure, high-budget shoots while thriving on today's inevitable tight schedules. His hands-on approach has made him a trusted problem solver on set and helped him forge strong, lasting relationships with directors, agencies, and clients alike. As co-chair of the CPC, Martin champions best practices, inclusivity, and the development of the next generation of production people. For him, producing is more than logistics. It's about the vision, the culture, and creativity. Martin brings a wealth of experience, compelling anecdotes, and a grounded perspective on what it really means to produce. Martin Box. Martin Box, welcome. Such a privilege to have you on to chat, mate. A person that everyone I know has nothing but the utmost respect and time for, so it's a privilege. Look, what I usually do, Martin, is I always start out by asking somebody to give me their journey and give me their backstory, how they got in and what they did. We will get to that, but to start with, I want to try it a little differently, and I want to give you two scenarios. Scenario A is sitting at your own home, eating your own homemade pickles and chutney, watching Toast of London, or Scenario B, being on set with Taika Waititi, shooting an Apple commercial.
Well, I've done both of those at different times. So I think, as this is about production, I think I'd have to say staying at home and eating pickles and toast with watching Toast of London.
Okay, that is a fair answer. A fair answer. So tell me about the commercial with Taika Waititi and the Apple commercial. How did that come about?
That was through. Well, I've known Taika for many, many years. I think I did one of his first ad back in distant past when I was working at Hungry Man, and he was originally signed. Well, he still is signed to Hungry Man. But when he first started working at Hungry Man. And we've just stayed in touch since. We've gotten really well. We've always stayed in touch. I've kind of followed his career, obviously, as it's kind of blossomed and exploded into the Taika that we all know now. And occasionally over the years, he's always popped up and said, can you work on this? Can you work on that? And a lot of them don't stick, mainly because he's too busy and he goes off into another black hole of Marvel or something. And this one just happened to stick. And I think it was just lucky that, all the timings worked really well. And it was through Hungry Man, who I've still got great connections with and still in touch with all the guys there. So they needed a quick fix, and I was only too keen to, get involved because, as I said, he's a friend, and it's also helping out another production company that I've kept in close contact with.
Well, I've had a look at it. It's a brilliant commercial. There's so much to it. It seems like there's animatronics, puppeteering. I think volume stage.
No, there was no volume. No, it was all. No, there was no volume. It was all location. Apart from it's location and sets combination, but it was all. Okay. I mean, it was a very quick turnaround, and Taika was actually filming in the UK when we were in the pitch and early pre. And he was working with his production designer, Ra, on another project. And they sat down and through the pitch process and did a lot of the working out of like what locations would work from a creative and production sense as well. And we're doing early drafts of sets, and that all kind of rolled into the pitch, into the treatment. And I think that was what got it over the line, what got him over the line with the client. But that meant we had a really good head start when we got into production, because we only had, I think, 4 weeks to turn it around, which was nuts. But wow. I think, it was one of those ones you kind of threw a lot of money at to solve a lot of those schedule problems, but the client had the money to do it. So, and they had a deadline that couldn't move because it was based around a date. I think I was in November this time last year. So it was an immovable date. So we just had to work back into it.
And on the subject of no time, or very small amount of time, and then having a shed load of money to throw at the project to get it over the line, does it remove a lot of the stress and a lot of the pressure, or is it still, considering what was involved with that shoot, was it still high pressure and high stress?
No, it's still insane amount of pressure, but it just means that you can actually make decisions quicker because you've got the resources there to to do it, as opposed to when you've got less financial resources, you have to think of different ways of approaching it and maybe tackle it from 2 or 3 different ways, or discuss it with multiple suppliers. But when you've got the financial resource, you can just go with the quickest route, which often isn't the most cheapest, but or the most efficient financially. But it's you can just press those buttons and just get going. And you can, it allows you to then make changes on the fly as well, because you've got the budget to be able to kind of revise stuff as you go, as opposed to like having to get it all approved and then go. So that it does help, but it was pretty hectic. I mean, we had a amazing and huge production team, which you have to do in that situation as well. Just, you need the money to then have, multiple people in production to be able to kind of look after departments, and make sure that there's plenty of eyes across all the different elements that are moving at pace.
So that's the top end. Let's say you're working with the best director, one of the best brands, with a shed load of money. What's it like when you get, let's say you get a really good script, a great script, and it doesn't have the dollars that are there to necessarily, see the vision through? Does the script always win out? If it's a great script and it's no money, will you take it on, or will you try and get the director to take it on regardless?
I would say that most scripts don't have the money. I mean, it's just the reality of like work these days. I mean, it's very unusual that you get a script that's got enough budget to actually achieve what is on paper. So I think that's part of the process, and the biggest part of the process really is like the working with the director to kind of keep the essence of the script, keep the idea, but then change it so it's actually achievable, and also acceptable to the clients. And so I think that's probably like, sometimes it's like 90% of the job, because you never. It used to be when I first started out that you would have the time and the clients would have the budget for you to actually look through the script, break it all down, and then quote it, and even have time to get multiple different quotes in and go, okay, well, we can do this, we can do that. And that doesn't happen anymore. You have like generally 24 hours to turn around a budget. So most of that time, maybe 2 or 3 days at max. And in most of that time, you're just using your own knowledge and making 2 or 3 phone calls just to make sure you haven't kind of set yourself up for disaster, to put the budget together, knowing that you're going to have to rework through that as the production gets going. So it's kind of it's a very different process, I'd say.
And what's it like with the director when you are trying to figure out the budget, and again, you've got that small amount of time to turn it around? Do you work in silos, or is it a collaboration? It
should be a collaboration, but sometimes you end up working in silos for whatever, sometimes there's a schedule pressure. The director may have some schedule pressures of being unavailable, so you end up having to make calls that you just have to you do with your best knowledge and experience that you're pretty sure will be able to work, or you'll be able to negotiate into a good place later. But it should be as collaborative as you can be. Otherwise you end up just taking too much ownership of the project, and that's not what it's about. The key is actually having some sort of clear dialogue with the director and making sure that they are communicating what they want, really, at the early stage. And often a treatment is only part of that. So that, you need to have a lot more one-on-one conversations and a bit of back and forth. And hopefully they trust you and they trust your judgment as a producer to be able to say, well, can we do this, or can we approach it in this way? Or maybe we can make it more efficient by approaching it in this manner. So that is important. And I think that when often we'll receive a treatment hours before the bid goes in, and you've already done an estimate, and then you might just tailor that estimate quickly to that treatment. At that point, you need to have a couple of, there normally is a few really quick conversations, but to get through that process. So you have to be really direct as well. You can't pussyfoot around too much. You have to be quite, direct and say, this is where I think we need to be. Well, this is how I think we're going to get it over the line. Sometimes it doesn't get, well received, but I think you just have to, that's part of the nature of it.
And what's that conversation like, Martin? Or what's that scenario like? Obviously, when you're working with directors, I assume you've worked with them a few times, you know who they are, you've kind of got a bit of a run or a rapport with them. When you do have to be that matter of fact and tell them, no, this is the way that it is, have you got a certain way of doing it? Or have you just got to the point now where you can be direct and people accept it or understand it?
No, I think it's horses for courses. I think it depends on the director and how they like to work, and also where you like at the moment on freelancing. So it's you have to tailor your responses for your role within the project as well. I think as an EP, you can be a bit more, creative in essence, and you can have those kind of one-on-one dialogue. That one-on-one dialogue with the director, and have a bit of back and forth creatively about how to problem solve. I think when you're freelance line producing, you're often brought in quite late in the project, so it's a bit more of a problem solving situation. But obviously there's going to be times in that where you have to put forward recommendations, and hopefully hopefully they're well received, and you can then act on them. But I think a lot of that is to do with, like, I guess, how quickly you can build a rapport with that director that you're working with. And that sometimes it's a very short amount of time. Previously, in another life, it was preferable to work with director and producer teams, because that would be that they'd have that shorthand then, where the director would be trusting the creative choices that the producer was making, and the producer would have the ability to have a clear and open dialogue with the director. But that doesn't really exist so much these days.
Let's talk about how you started out in the caper. I know that if I have a look back through your LinkedIn profile, it's
pretty empty. It's getting more filled now.
Yes, yeah, there would be. I'd like to have a little bit more information, but that's okay. We roll with what we've got. You've got a Bachelor of Fine Art, is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So I've got my God, this is going back into the mist of time, into a previous century. I studied. I actually left school early and did a graphic design course, what you would call a tech over here, and then ended up transferring into a fine art painting degree, which was weird because at the time art was going through a kind of big transition, and I ended up not doing much painting, but actually making some very odd installations with VHS filming and 8mm animation things that were like pretty shocking. I don't have any evidence of them. I've just got bad memories of them. But that kind of got me interested, and actually rolling back a little bit, my graphic design course had a module that was film history. So that was kind of opened my eyes to film, and then got more involved in it and in new technologies as they were then, videotape, believe it or not, for art, for creating art. And after I graduated out of that, I just was kind of sick of the art world. So just was trying to find some employment, really, because I've been poor forever. And then ended up bouncing around a few jobs and didn't really have much direction for a few years. And I was working in a bookshop, and a friend of mine that I'd met at art school just called me up and said, I've just landed a job in a TV company as a runner. Do you want to have a go? And I was like, I didn't even know what a runner was. I had no idea that there's even a career in television existed. And but he lured me in with the promise of a mobile phone and access to a car. So I said yes, and ended up working for Disney on children's TV shows for, I think, 2.5, 3 years. And then did a lot of, through that, did a lot of floor managing. It was live recorded TV, which was really amazing education, actually. And then working on single camera recording and live recording and all sorts of stuff. So that was really, really like what got me interested, and opened my eyes up to commercial world, filming, generally long form film, all of that stuff. So at that point, I was like, okay, this is where I want to be. I finally found where I want to end up. This is my career. I can see myself, I'm enjoying this, and I can see myself building some career out of it. But after TV, it was at the time, the music video world, MTV was massive, so that was the next logical step. That's what I was interested in personally. I didn't really want to stay in television, and then was freelancing as a runner, as an assistant director. I thought I wanted to be an assistant director, but when I got a couple of opportunities to first AD, I realized I was terrible. So ditched that idea and started moving towards production. And then got my first break at a production company who had a little office in Camden, and they hired me as a PA, and was working on music videos, for I think 4 or 5 years, going up through the ranks, production manager, eventually producing, and then produced music videos for a few years. Lots of great bands, great directors. That was really super exciting and fun to be around. But then MTV started. The importance of MTV and culture, everything started changing. Music videos weren't quite as important as they. I think the internet and the websites and everything at that point, this is how old I am, had started blowing up. So everyone was like, everything was moving away from broadcast TV, or satellite TV as MTV was. The actual resources and the money that was being pumped into music videos was becoming more splintered, a bit like it is now as the media landscape changes. So the budgets were dropping off massively, and then and a lot of my friends who worked in music videos started working in advertising and had worked in both. So I just focused on that to try and find a career in TV advertising production, which was it's pretty hard, actually, because there's very much a barrier between, if you were doing music videos and you're producing those, then that was all well and good, but you didn't understand the advertising world. That was the assumption. So I ended up having to take a step back to kind of take a step up, and ended up production managing for I think 2 years. And then in fact, weirdly, one of the ways I actually found of actually getting kind of your foot in the door was helping younger directors to do spec ads and get noticed by production companies, and ended up getting me and my friend who'd been PAing together. I ended up doing a spec ad for him, and he ended up getting signed, and now he's super famous, successful director. So that was how you kind of but that was how it was then as well. You had a producer director team, so it's like, okay, if I want to become a producer, I've got to make a director. That was kind of the route, and then that was it. That was you're in freelancing and or working in a production company or whatever.
So you never really had the desire to start out with to end up as a producer, but I guess now once you got in and once you worked your way up, did you find that there were certain qualities that were required, Martin, that to be a really great producer you needed to have?
Yeah, I guess I guess there are. It's hard to pinpoint what they are. I think every producer is a bit different, which is part of the fun of it. Really, it's very much it's a people and the relationship um, job or career. And there's certain things which I think are universal, like being very diplomatic and having a bit of tenacity and being able to multitask. I think we talked about communication. I think as well is important. So I think those are all traits that you have to have, but I don't think there's no identikit way. Everyone's got a different way of managing, and that also goes down to, I guess, the relationship then with the director. Those kind of personalities build the teams, and that's really the gold in that partnership is, do the personalities get on and how they then can respond to each other, and that's what hopefully you bring to the project, or every project you do.
So I've spoken with a few people on the podcast about producers and if they need to be able to have a creative mindset or a creative brain to be able to see the vision of a treatment or a story that either a director or an ad agency has put together. Do you think that that's the case? Do you think you have to have some sort of creative idea or creative awareness to be able to be a producer?
100%. Yeah, I think that's like you have to have an appreciation of it and understanding, because you need to know what the end goal is. Otherwise, you'll just you just become effectively, you've got those layers within the production department anyway. You've got production managers that are amazing at doing that are amazing at actually controlling the production and managing the production, but they might not have that kind of vision, or they might not want to have that kind of vision for the creative, or have the responsibility. But the best producers, I think, want to have that responsibility, and they embrace it, and they're always looking to have an influence on the final product. And I think that's the value in having good producers from whatever side it is, whether it's agency or or even in a client. If you've got someone who is expected to be producing work, it's not just about organizing, it's about having a vision for it and helping to get that vision made in whatever medium you're doing it.
I think the same way as well. I think I had somebody say that no, you can be quite analytical, and I thought to myself, I don't know if that's maybe they just didn't describe it well enough. But I certainly think that if you want to be a producer, you've got to have some sort of ability to see something on a page and then see how it can come to life, or have some sort of reference point that you might have seen it before, or you've seen something similar done before.
So I agree. I think you have to, and I think also you need to have an understanding of what you have to have an appreciation and understanding of culture, of what clients will be expecting, of what the directors will be expecting, and so all of that plays into being creative. You have to have some sort of creative instinct. Otherwise, you can still operate as a producer, but I think the best ones do have that.
Directors, you're on a job with them, the day-to-day interactions. Can you give me a bit of an idea of what that's like for yourself personally? Do you like to have constant communication? Is there chats all the time? Are you catching up for coffees? Are you watching movies together? Are you going for long drives?
Love to watch a movie together if we had time. We never have time. No, I think it's like it's the age-old joke is that when you end up particularly when you're overseas or something like that, you're just living in each other's pockets the whole time. Like you just spend 16 hours a day with each other. The only time you're not with them is when you're on Zoom with your family, you're in your hotel sleep. That's like it, you know. So you have to. So there's that. It's constant. When it's slightly different when you're doing it when you're producing something from home, but it's still equivalent, and you spend every moment of every day talking about the job really and trying to get the best out of it. I think that's part of that kind of whole dialogue, and you have to, I think as a producer, you have to, I think that's commercial producing is slightly different to like if you're working on, it's a different role if you're working on long form or television or something, which is commercial producing is much more like line producing in long form. So that, which is where you are like in the trenches and you're, dealing with day-to-day problems. And the schedules in television commercials are generally so tight that you just don't have enough time to have a breath. So you have to spend every moment. And if you've got a quiet moment, then that's that quiet moment. You'll then talk about the creative, and hopefully you'll be able to have conversations about tone and start talking about the photography and not just problem solving. That's the, so you need to be next to that person, next to that director. So when they get that moment to talk about that stuff or share an idea or put forward an idea and see if we think we can get it over through the agency and through the client, you've got to be there to respond to it. So it's just constant. There is no off.
So you're just talking about problem solving, and let's say you are on a set. I'm sure you've had scenarios where something has gone tits up, or it's, the pressure's on because you've got to solve the problem. What's it like? First of all, what do you have to do in those certain situations? And have you got an example of something, you don't have to name clients or agencies, where it was a pretty big problem to fix and you're able to get through it really well?
Oh my God, there's so many problems to fix. And I don't know if you ever get through. I mean, I think the thing is that I always try and say to myself and say to other people in the production department is that the sun does go down and the sun does come up, and the day is only so long, and there is always an end to that day. So you always will get through it. And if you haven't finished what you need to shoot by the end of that day, then you'll end up doing another day or you won't shoot it. It's simple. It's like you just have to break it down to, the simplicities of what we're actually doing, because it's very easy to get wrapped up into the emotion of it because of the pressure and the tension. So I always just try and break it back down to, the simplest thing. And also, as long as ultimately shoots are really dangerous places to work. So as long as people aren't actually hurt and people aren't, there isn't a chance of someone getting hurt, then a lot of the, the guff and the excitement that goes around an issue particularly on a commercial set, we'll get worked out. It's not really that important. It's important to some people at a certain time and a place, but at the end of the day, there will be a solution to it. And I think that, and I've had, dozens of situations over the years that you kind of think, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this one? Or, I didn't see that one coming, and I think I've seen everything coming. But there is always a solution. Often it comes down to just being well prepared in the making sure you've covered as many options, and everything's all tied up, and legally and insurance wise is in place properly. And then there's always a way of resolving the issue. I mean, diplomacy is a big thing as well, particularly on a commercial set where you need to negotiate a change at the last minute between multiple parties, firstly the director, then the agency, and then the client. That's a pretty tricky thing. And then you'll be relying on other people to help you with that diplomacy. So, those relationships are important. But I think, there's always a solution, I've had, some pretty crazy situations, but I mean, everything's been resolved. There's not been anything that hasn't ever been resolved in some way. I mean, a funny one. I sent an anecdote. I'll give you an anecdote, which is quite a funny one. I was working on a big bank project back in the UK with Sally Phillips, the actor, and she was swimming in a swimming pool doing breaststroke. And we were lucky enough to find this swimming pool. It was an amazing, brand new swimming pool. We had full access to it. And so she was swimming all morning, basically, in one direction with a crane on her face, just camera here on her face. And she's having the dialogue is in her head. She's thinking, and it's just her reactions in her face. It's quite a complicated shot and difficult for an actor to do while they're swimming breaststroking lengths. So and she still is a famous actor, but at the time she was huge, particularly big. And so we shot all morning in this one swimming pool, and the idea was we would go to another swimming pool to shoot in the afternoon because the light had changed, so we could match the light. So we break for lunch, go back in the afternoon to put her in the pool to shoot the other half of the dialogue in her head, and her getting out of the pool and a few other scenes. And the pool was a completely different color, and I was like, "Why is the pool a different color? This isn't going to match." So I went to find the people who ran the location, and for some reason, in the morning, the guy because the pool was opening to the public in 2 weeks' time. They'd done a pH test on the pool and it wasn't quite right. So someone had dumped in a whole bunch of bleach into the pool to kind of kill whatever bacteria was in there. And so we had to pull the chute. That was it, done. And we had to go back a month later, or 3 weeks later, after the pool had settled down and Sally Phillips was available again. But it was like that moment of like, oh, okay, there's like nothing you can do. There's no salvaging this one. It's just a massive insurance claim. That's kind of like, and with an actor, it's like, okay, so when are you ever going to be available again to do the end of the ad? So that was quite a lot of negotiation. But in some ways that was easy because there's no choice. It was just like, we just had to call it. And sometimes that's easier than having to renegotiate how we can reshoot a whole scene that we're about to drop in one shot, which is like the hardest thing to do.
Martin, let's talk about the CPC. Now, you've been the current co-chair since 2021. Do you want to run us through the Commercial Producers Council and its function within the industry?
Well, I think what we're trying to do, and I don't know it's hard to know how successful we are, but what we're trying to do is give the production community a bit of a voice, really, to sort of express how we feel that the production can be best managed and what is best practice in production, and to also encourage inclusive work practices, diversity. The hope is that we can get into some training schemes and attachments in the near future, which is something we're looking at, to try and encourage people who, like myself, might not have thought of production or filming as a career option, to look at that as a serious career option. So that's the I guess what our overall aims are. I mean, the effectiveness of it is hard to say, to be honest. I think that the post-COVID, I think that we've definitely had a bit of an uptick in people wanting to have dialogue with us and listen to what we might have to say, and taking the organisation a bit more seriously. And hopefully we can leverage that a bit more in the coming years, because I think it's important that the community does, kind of have a unified voice and kind of put forward what is really, best examples of producing work in a safe and inclusive environment.
And what are the biggest issues facing production companies that are voiced when you are in those CPC meetings or you're having discussions? What's the outlook, and what are the concerns that people or production companies have?
I think overall at the moment, I think the concern is just the financial and economic climate. I think for clients, agencies, the volume of work has I think definitely tailed off. We had a bit of a purple patch, I think, post-COVID as well, with people filming over here from overseas, which also helps the production community. But that hasn't really, and that was only going to be a flash in the pan anyway, and that's well and truly over. I think there's a lot of in-house production going on now, whether it's internally with clients or whether it's internally with agencies, which has also taken some of the volume of work out of the production company traditional community, and I think that's only going to continue to get more. I think also the media landscape's completely changed, which I think is a massive one, probably the biggest one, where most of the advertising content that's being made is made for social now, and made often internally with internal resources, or at a different production level, for want of a better way of putting it. So I think that's the hardest thing to manage, and I think that's just the changing landscape in the media, and compounded by an economic situation where there's no money in the country, so no one's really keen to advertise. I think I think that may lighten up a bit next year, I think, but I think that the change in the media landscape is going to just get tougher and tougher and tougher for everyone.
So production companies, I mean, they're always going to exist, I'd assume. Do you think that you'll start to see the reduction in production companies, over the next 5 years?
No, I don't know whether it's a reduction. I just think that the production companies would have to start looking at different revenue streams or different parts of creating content to actually survive. I don't think that I think there's still always going to be a place for them, and maybe even more so, because I think clients are doing a lot of their creative in-house, so they need to, it still needs to be produced. So I think there's always going to be a time and a place. I think it's just about how adaptable and production companies can be and how relevant they can keep themselves. I think there's old business models probably don't stack up anymore. So I think it's a moving landscape. I don't think there's any kind of one production company model fits all. I think it's a bit more, you have to figure out where you want to place yourself within the market, what kind of work you want to do, and focus on that.
Specialize instead of generalize.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's it. But I mean, maybe specialize in a couple of different areas or something. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, obviously it's a conversation that I think a lot of people are having, a lot of production companies are having. I think being creative and showing that you can bring a creative voice to a project is important for production companies. I think that, having a brand that people want to be part of or want to be associated with will really help in the future. So whatever that brand is, whether it's just fixing problems or whether it's being a great creative outlet. But I think that having that defined brand is going to be important.
And finally, I always ask this at some point throughout the conversation: advice for newcomers, Martin. What advice would you give new producers starting out?
Oh gosh, that's hard. Which shouldn't be hard, really, but it is actually quite hard because there's so much to kind of take on board for new producers. I think one of the key things to do is, if you do think you want to be a producer, is try and find someone that you can mentor off somehow, or a couple of people. I think it's important that you get, consistent kind of education as well, not just bouncing around and then becoming a bit of a problem solver. I think it's having a kind of coherent approach for a period of time is really important. And I think that then you can obviously have a couple of mentors or a mentor for a year and then switch it up or try and do some different work. But I think try and get a breadth of knowledge as well is important. Like do different work, don't just end up doing social content. Try and do, commercial stuff as well. Don't be afraid to take a production coordinating role on a massive job just to be around different types of technicians and producers and, to get as much experience under your belt as possible. I think that can be really key, taking a step back. You don't have to do it for long, or just a one job every now and again. I think it can just open up the doors and make you look at things differently. But I think, a breadth of experience is just super key, especially now. I think, obviously you can talk about having skills and multiple skills and multitasking and understanding AI and understanding different platforms and whatever. But I think that comes with the territory. I think actually having a rounded experience of production, knowing how to watching how other people do it, observing that, learning from that, and bringing that to your table would be the best advice I could give, I think.
Yeah, sound advice. The more you can get in and get your hands dirty, so to speak, and just be doing and around people, the more you'll get from that than not doing.
Yeah, you're always learning. So, I mean, I'm always constant. I mean, like, I can't learn fast enough because, like, technology changes, and you have to, as a producer, you have to be across it, but you don't need to know it, because that's why you hire experts to do it. But you have to be across it and understand the benefits and the pitfalls of it. So, that's why you need to have, you just need to be constantly updating yourself. It's like a constant update,
Martin, I'd like to say thank you so much for jumping on. So appreciate you taking the time to share just a little bit about your journey and your war stories, working with famous directors.
We've got plenty more war stories.
Well, we'll have to do another episode where we just talk about warriors, because they do seem to be, I find them the most enjoyable, and it's good to hear from other people what it's like when shit hits the fan, or it doesn't have to be when that completely goes to no good. But again, just thanks for sharing, thanks for jumping on, thanks for chatting, and I'm sure a lot of people out there who know you and respect you will find what you've discussed very invaluable. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Benson. Thanks for the kind words. It's good. Plenty of more war stories, so maybe we could do a few of those one day. Might make people laugh or cry or both or all.
Thanks, Martin. Well, that's it for today. I'll make the logo bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.